Welcome back everyone to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to be talking about Itto, going through our character archive. Now, like normal, we started at the beginning, and as new characters come out, we'll be talking about them immediately first. So normally we're starting at the top and then going down. So we're about halfway before we reach the oldest characters in the book, which we'll be talking about later. But as new characters are going to be coming out, as well as the characters on the banners are going to have precedence for newer videos. So with these build guides like Xilonen, she obviously had precedence because she was a newer character before Yunjin or Itto. Also, characters that are going to be on the banners, like in the future, Nahida and Hu Tao, are going to have precedence as well. Now, we've already had a video on Nahida pretty recently, so I'm going to not do a build guide just for when she comes out because it's been pretty recent and nothing has really changed for Nahida for the time being. Now, the thing is I haven't touched on Hu Tao, so we haven't done a build guide on that, which means that Hu Tao will be getting hers precedence. Even though she's supposed to be later, she'll have precedence before some of these other characters if I get to her first, if the banners are there. Now, I'll wait until she actually drops, but basically the idea is we're going to be kind of following that order. I know some people have been kind of confused with the order, so I just wanted to go over that one more time. Now, let's go ahead and jump and talk about Itto. The great thing about Itto is that back when he kind of released, we didn't have a lot of characters that were really Geo super specific heavy. Yes, we had Noelle and we had Zhongli and Albedo. And Zhongli, originally when he dropped, was not that great, but thankfully over time they fixed him. And Noelle was a solid DPS, but honestly, Noelle really wasn't doing as much as she really could have, and Ningguang as well, but Ningguang also was even worse than Noelle. But Noelle was doing well, but not well enough to the point where she is right now, and we have a character like Furina to give her an insane buff. Also, other Geo characters like Xilonen, who's brand new, to give her even more of a buff. And obviously, we didn't have characters like Navia that worked with a lot of other elements as a DPS. So that being said, most of what we saw with Itto was really focused on Mono-Geo teams. And I can safely say, really with him still, following that Mono-Geo route is still usually taking a lot of precedence because of the character Gorou he's usually paired with because of his abilities that he has. Now, looking into Itto, even though he is a defense scaling character, he's kind of like Hu Tao. He takes his defense and turns it into attack because his damage is actually focused on attack. So characters like Bennett or any attack buffing characters, like technically some other attack buffing characters are Kujo Sara. So technically any attack increases from outside sources are actually going to be useful for Itto. It's kind of like giving an outside attack increase for Hu Tao. Hu Tao uses HP to then convert and put on more attack, basically, and give herself more attack, which then allows her to do more damage. But usually when you build her, you go more into HP than you do attack. It's the same thing with Itto. Most of the time, you're going to be going into more defense, but don't necessarily think that an attack stat here is actually lost. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about his talents, how they work, leveling priority, and then we'll talk about actually building him. So looking at his normal attack talent, as you can see once again here, all of this is based off of attack. There is no defense or anything after it, and there's nothing written. Therefore, we know that it's based off of attack. His burst is going to give him an attack bonus, once again, to make sure he's doing more damage because of those normal attacks you're going to be doing, and that's the major way you're going to be doing your damage. And then also you have an attack speed bonus, which just allows you to attack faster. But once again, we see here that you're just taking your defense and turning it into more attack. If you do get some attack stats, don't necessarily feel like that's the worst. I wouldn't necessarily say to go into attack with him as a character. Just know that if you get attack stats here and there, or you get a character like Bennett or whatever that increases your attack, that's not necessarily terrible. It's actually a good thing for Itto. It's a positive stat to have. It's not something that you really want to go for all the way because defense will usually bring you farther, but attack isn't a useless stat on him. Now let's go ahead and talk about his different attacks that you're going to be doing. So he's a little bit different than other characters. When you are going to do you have 4 different attacks basically that you have in succession. So normally characters have 4 or 5 chain attacks that they kind of go through. And as you can see here, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 with him. Now, when his 2nd and 4th strike hits an opponent, Itto will gain 1 stack of superlative super strength for the 2nd hit and 2 stacks for the 4th hit. So here it would be this hit right here. The 2nd hit that you hit on an enemy would then give you 1 stack. The 4th hit that you hit on an enemy would give you 2 stacks. And you can have a max of 5 of these stacks at one time. So keep in mind with here though, keep in mind that your duration is 60 seconds long. So you keep each of those stacks that you gain is for 60 seconds. So if you gain 2 stacks, both of those stacks are staying for an entire minute. If you gain 1 stack, it's staying for an entire minute. That also means that it's a lot easier to hold on to your stacks during an entire rotation. If you start at the beginning or the end with Itto, it allows him to keep his stacks for a lot of his damage. Also, it just allows him to make sure that he's staying at his max stacks consistently. Additionally, Itto's normal attack combo does not immediately reset after sprinting or using his skill. So usually with characters, you usually do a few normal attacks, and if you dash, when you go ahead and do your start to do your normal attacks again, you would reset back to the beginning of the counter. Now, what that basically means is let's say I did right-in hits, or if I was doing Alhaitham normal attacks, if I had the chain of 1, 2, 3, and 4, if I did 1, 2 damage hits on an enemy, I hit an enemy twice, and then I dashed to get out of the way because I was getting attacked. As soon as I started to do damage again, or started to attack again, my first damage hit would be up here again. Whereas with Itto, if he gets, 1, 2 hits and then dashes or uses his skill, then I would immediately, my next hit is going to actually be this third damage hit right here. Basically what that allows you to do is not have to get reset back to 1 to only get 1 more stack. It allows you to get, basically go right to 3 and then to 4 to get 2 stacks. It is something that's small but very, very helpful to allow you to get 2 stacks and get those stacks a lot quicker. Now you're using your normal attacks to get those superlative super strength stacks, but with the charge attack, you're actually using up those superlative super strength stacks to actually do more damage. So with this charge attack, when holding to perform a charge attack, Itto unleashes a series of these slashes without consuming any stamina, which is also nice because all it's based off of is consuming 1 stack of superlative super strength every single time he throws out one of those slashes. When the final stack is consumed, Itto delivers a powerful final slash. So as you can see here, these are at level 1. The combo slash damage that he's going to be doing for those initial hits for each of the stacks that he has is going to do basically 5 of these slash hits. And then you have a final slash at the end that he's going to do. So he actually has, even though he has 5 stacks of superlative super strength that he can hold, he actually does 6 hits inside of his, basically his charge attack state. So it allows you to have a much larger hit at the end of your duration here. But if you don't have any superlative super strength stacks that are here, Itto will perform a single of one of a different type of slash, which is actually less, it looks like, and it'll probably stay the same throughout time. If you don't have any of those superlative super strength stacks, you're doing less damage than if you just did a regular, original damage hit, never mind the big damage hit at the end. Looking at that with Itto, that means that as long as those buffs are active for him, that means he can go through, do a bunch of normal attacks, get the max stacks of 5, then do your charge attack, kind of like rotation of 5 or 6 hits. Then you can go back, and if you still have a lot of your buffs active, that allows you to immediately go right back into doing normals to get more stacks. The best thing about this is that it allows Itto to just be a lot quicker with a lot of his damage usages. So let's go ahead and talk about his burst though now. Looking at his burst, basically he's going to go into the Oni King state. After that, he converts his normal charge and plunging attacks to Geo. So at this point in time, he gets Geo infusion. It increases his normal attack speed, which we see here at level 1, it's 10%. And then it'll increase, both of these numbers will increase as you level it up. And then also it increases his attack based on his defense, which is the major part that I was talking about earlier. Even though you are going into defense with him as a character, his damage is based still off of attack, but he's using defense to increase his attack, much like I was talking about with Hu Tao. On hit, the first and third strikes of his attack combo will each grant him a 1 stack of the superlative super strength. So now all 4 of those hits when you're in your burst state are going to allow you to, every single one of those hits is going to give you a stack. And the second, or the first, second, and third are going to give you 1 stack, and the 4th hit is going to give you 2 stacks. So when you're in your burst, the whole idea really with him is to get into your burst and then immediately do your 4-hit combo. What this allows you to do is have this first hit gets, when you're in your burst, allows you to get 1 stack. The second hit gets you 1 stack. The third hit gets you 1 stack. That's 3 stacks already, and you can have a maximum of 5. Well, when you hit that 4th hit, this is 2, so 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 5 stacks. So in the burst, your 4-chain attack hit is going to give you 5 stacks, which can then immediately allow you to jump into going into your damage instances of your charge attacks. So that's kind of the best thing about the burst. That's why obviously you're mainly using it. Never mind the attack increase, but also because of allowing you to get those stacks a lot quicker. It also decreases Itto's elemental and physical resistance by 20%, which means you are a little bit more vulnerable. But that's the great thing about Geo, is that really pairing him with other Geo characters that are, Noelle or Zhongli that are shielders is going to be extremely good for him. And even if you accidentally crystallize, creating those crystallized shields isn't necessarily terrible either, because it is, once again, helping him not get basically losing a lot of his HP, because he is more vulnerable in this state. So let's go ahead and talk about some passive talents next. With his first passive talent, it says when Itto uses those Kesugiri hits, he will obtain the following effects. Each slash increases the attack speed of his next slash by 10%, and the max attack speed increases 30%. So as he's doing each of the stacks that he's going to be doing inside of where his damage is, basically with these hits in the charge attacks, each one he hits, it's going to basically ramp up and make him go faster and faster as he does his charge attacks. Also, it increases his resistance to interruption. Once again, extremely good, even though he is a little bit more vulnerable in the state of not allowing him to basically be as strong or hefty. It also means that you can just pop a shield or have a really solid healer to make sure that his HP stays high. And the great thing here is it increases his resistance to interruption, which allows you to actually focus on a healer if you don't have an amazing shielder to really protect him from getting knocked around and getting knocked out of that charge attack state. Also, the second passive talent states that the damage that he's going to be doing in those charge attacks is increased by 35% of Itto's defense. Another reason to go a lot into defense, but once again, keep in mind the attack isn't actually terrible for him as a character. Now, before I forget, let's go ahead and talk about Itto's skill. With Itto's skill, he's going to throw out an Ushi, which is going to do geo damage when it hits opponents, and also give Itto a stack of superlative super strength. It'll taunt enemies when it's nearby, allowing them to basically take the hits for Itto, which is nice considering we were talking about in the burst. He's a little bit more vulnerable, but that also means that his HP or Ushi's HP is based on Itto's HP. It also means that when Ushi takes damage, though, Itto will gain a stack of superlative super strength, and you can get one of those stacks once every 2 seconds. Also, when Ushi falls or has 0 HP or the duration just straight up ends and he's been on field and leaves the field, Itto will then gain 1 stack of superlative super strength. So there's a lot more ways basically with Ushi that allow him to do more damage, and obviously mainly make sure that he's getting more of those superlative super strength stacks. If you want to keep it in mind for characters like Chiori or something like that, this is, Ushi is considered a Geo construct, which will allow, once again, characters like Zhongli to either help out with his idea with his character kit, or with Chiori, it'll allow her to have 2 of those dolls to come out on field, which will allow her to do more damage because it is a Geo construct. So keep that in mind as you are running with Itto. Now let's go ahead and look at some weapons, and obviously since I don't have Itto, we will actually go look at a character that I have as a Claymore. So there obviously are going to be a few weapons that are very good for him as a character. With him, obviously, his best weapon is going to be Redhorn Stone Thresher, which is his personal weapon. Now, he ascends into crit rate, and this weapon is going to go 88.2% into crit damage at level 90. Like normal, we don't really talk about the weapon a lot because obviously it is the best in slot for the character. So if you have Redhorn Stone Thresher, obviously Itto is going to be wanting it. Now, the backup to that, in my personal opinion, is actually going to be Serpent Spine. Every 4 seconds a character is on the field, they will deal 8% more damage and take 2.4% more damage. And this effect can have a maximum of 5 stacks. Now, as you know, he likes to stay on field, getting into his burst and then immediately doing a bunch of those normal attacks and then doing a bunch of charge attacks. And if, once again, those buffs are still active, you don't have to use a skill, you don't have to do whatever, you can still stay in that state and keep going. And stay in and getting those stacks of superlative super strength to constantly do more and more rotations with him on field and just allow him to stay on field for a longer period of time, which allows you to get more and more damage out of this specific weapon. But it will be reduced by 1 stack when the character takes damage, which the reason I think that usually this weapon isn't that great for a lot of teams or a lot of characters unless they are a shielder user. So characters like Beta who produce a shield for themselves and don't take damage, it allows them to not actually, actually allow them to keep some of the damage buffs based on this specific weapon. But also the best thing is usually with character like Itto, you probably have like Zhongli or something like that to have an amazing shielder on your team. So you don't have to worry about him, number 1, taking damage, because we already talked about in his burst, he will take more damage because his physical and elemental resistance is a lot lower, which means he's going to take more damage. But if you have a shielder, that's the best way to go, especially if you're running Serpent Spine. Always run a shielder if you're running Serpent Spine. It'll make sure you're getting a lot more of these stacks. Your damage will fall off if you do this because you'll probably be getting hit a lot and basically making these stacks absolutely gone and non-apparent because of it. So a little bit beyond that though is something like Skyward Pride. The weapon is ER main stat, which could be a little bit of an annoyance, but you do have a high attack stat, which once again, Itto likes a little bit, not more than, you know, defense, but it's kind of at least helpful to have a high base attack for him as a character. But also it increases damage by 8% at R1, and the ability also states that after using an elemental burst, normal and charge attack hits have the extra, you know, idea to actually hit an extra vacuum blade at some point in time as well. This is kind of an extra hit and an extra weapon to really use for him as a character. There are other weapons that could be good. Yes, Skyward Pride is a good weapon because, okay, it has some ER main stat, has a high attack, but once again, you're losing a lot of crit and you are also losing any, you know, defense percent main stat weapons as well. So keep that in mind as you are running for, you know, Skyward Pride. If you have it, you can use it on him. It'll allow you once again to go for his burst. That'll just mean that you're gonna have to focus a lot in a lot of those crit stats in other parts of his kit, but it does allow you to have a higher ER so that you're always making sure you're getting his burst back. Something else that you could do is Wipe Blind. The great thing about Wipe Blind is that it is a defense percent main stat weapon. It is a 4-star and at 51.7% at level 90 for defense. Now the ability states that a normal and charge attack will increase attack and defense for 6 seconds and it has 4 stacks. And obviously he's going to be hitting 4 times in his initial state to get into his, you know, charge attacks that he can do. So those normal and charge attacks are then going to increase his attack and defense by 6% for a max of 4 stacks. He's getting a 24% max at R1 of this weapon, and at R5 it can go from a 12% per stack into a 48% max stacks for more damage. So, or 48% for more attack and defense. So it allows a lot more defense basically with that weapon. And yes, there are other weapons that you could throw together with him on as a character. Yes, there are other specific 5-star weapons that could work well because he kind of does want some of the stats. So if you find another crit rate or crit damage weapon that is useful and you're like, well, I accidentally have one of these other weapons. I wasn't really looking to get it, but I do have some of these other weapons that can work. I'm not necessarily going to say that it doesn't work, but it can. There are some other things, you know, things like Beacon of the Reed Sea for stat sticking usually. It increases a lot of, if you put your skill out, which Itto usually does, then that'll be something that you'll actually want because then that'll increase your attack. So Beacon has a crit rate main stat, and it will also increase your attack. It is okay and nice. With that weapon though, I would actually not use a shielder because you want to take some damage actually with him as a character for the weapon to get more of your attack kind of back to you. So it could be nice. But, you know, keep in mind that that also does mean that you have to kind of worry about certain things with him as a character. So besides that, though, I don't really think there are too many weapons that are going to be absolutely insane for him. I'm sure you could find some other crit weapons that can work, things like Talking Stick or something like that for just stat sticking. And I guess if you have some sort of, you know, pyro character in the team, you could try to proc some of the ability on the weapon as well. But, you know, between those two weapons, because they are crit main stats on the 4-stars, things like Serpent Spine and Talking Stick can be useful for its stat sticking. Don't really think about the abilities too much because it will be kind of difficult to do so for Talking Stick. It's a little bit easier for Serpent Spine, especially if you are a, you know, kind of have a shielder, especially someone like Zhongli, to make sure that your character like Itto is staying alive and also making sure you're getting these stacks. Yes, you can use things like Wolf's Gravestone because it increases attack, but once again, even though it is nice to have attack, it isn't the main focus. It's like you wouldn't put an attack percent weapon on Hu Tao. You would rather put an HP percent weapon, which you really even wouldn't want to do that, but once again, the conversion is going to be better if you put on defense, and obviously that second passive talent is also going a long way as well. Now let's go ahead and talk about artifacts. Now with artifacts with Itto, the really only set you really should be running is 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams really most of the time with him as a character, because there's really no other reason to run most other sets with him, because once again, Itto's getting so much out of it that it makes the most sense for him. Now, the 2-piece is giving a defense percent increase of 30%, and the 4-piece states that a character equipped with this artifact set will obtain the Curiosity effect in the following conditions. When he's on the field, specifically Itto, When he's on the field, the character gains 1 stack after hitting an opponent with a Geo attack, which, once again, you have those Geo infusions, so it's going to be very easy to do so, triggering a maximum of once every 0.3 seconds. When you're off the field, you'll get a stack every 3 seconds, but the Curiosity can stack up to 4 times, each providing 6% defense and 6% Geo damage bonus. When 6 seconds passes without gaining a Curiosity stack, 1 stack will then be lost. So the great thing about this, though, is that you're basically always making sure when he's on field and he has that infusion, you're always getting one of those stacks. Now, when he's not ready really with this, 4-piece, when he's not doing Geo damage or not doing anything like that, then you want to make sure that you're getting Itto off field so that when he's off field, he's at least grabbing a stack every 3 seconds and keeping the 6 seconds kind of cooldown to then get rid of all this, one of those stacks. So obviously a very good 4-piece for him because he can use it to the kind of nth extent. Now, there is technically another set that could work if you somehow, for some odd reason, have really good pieces on this, and that is a 4-piece of Desert Pavilion Chronicle set. I'm laughing at this because honestly, it's really not that great. The 2-piece, obviously, you're absolutely useless to you. The only reason that I've seen people even try to use this as a weird combo set because they don't have Husk of Opulent Dreams and they're just using Desert Pavilion is because of the 4-piece. Because when charge attacks hit opponents, which is the major way you're doing a lot of your damage, the equipping character's normal attack speed will increase by 10%, while normal and charging plunging attack damage will be increased by 40%. So as you hit your charge attacks, you're doing then more damage and you're increasing your normal attack speed to then, once again, keep that in mind as you're kind of getting those stacks normally. So there is a reason to use Desert Pavilion, but I wouldn't really say it's a very good reason. There is another set, though, that isn't necessarily terrible, and that is the 4-piece of Retracing Bolide. Now, this is only going to work, once again, if you have an extremely strong shielding character, specifically talking about Zhongli, considering it's one of the best characters. I've talked about a lot, but he's one of the best characters for Itto as a character. So if you are using this and you have some Retracing Bolide pieces, and they're better than whatever you have on Husk, then I would probably say you can just go ahead and use this. It increases shield strength by 35%, which could be good. Also, the 4-piece states that while protected by a shield, gain 40% normal and charge attack damage. It's exactly what you get from the 4-piece damage increase from the 4-piece Desert Pavilion. You lose the normal attack, increase kind of here. But honestly, that shield strength in the 2-piece of Retracing Bolide is going to be more useful than the 15% animo damage bonus in Desert Pavilion. So I just wanted to keep that in mind as you guys are kind of talking about this as we kind of go through this a little bit. Now, if you don't really have anything, once again, I would say overall, though, 4-piece Husk is going to be your best bet. If you're grinding out a 4-piece Husk, you can go ahead and use a 2-piece of that, a 2-piece of Archaic Petra, which gains a 15% Geo damage bonus to the character. Also, if you want to combine one of those two, the defense percent from Husk and the Geo damage bonus from Archaic Petra, if you want to combine, I wouldn't really combine those two together. What I would actually do is choose one of those two and combine it with a 2-piece of Emblem, just to make sure if you are a little bit lower on ER and you kind of find it difficult to get his burst back, that's going to be best in slot for you. If we're looking at other things besides this, though, and talking about main stats, obviously I am on Navia, so they are going to be vastly different than what you're going to do on Itto. But with the Sands, you're going to go defense percent always. The Goblet here, you're going to go for Geo damage bonus all the way. And with the Circlet, either crit rate or crit damage. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty normal for damage dealing characters. You're going to usually follow that, whatever they usually stack into the most here. And then obviously their own personal damage bonus, and then the crit rate or crit damage on the Circlet. Now, once again, he does ascend into crit rate, which means that you might have an easier time getting crit rate. Now, that's not necessarily to say that you will. If you have his weapon, you're probably going to want a crit rate Circlet. Most of the time, from what I've seen, I think people mainly use a crit rate Circlet just because of what everything is really offered. But if you do have a crit rate weapon and you are using Serpent Spine or something like that, then it makes sense why you could, if you have enough crit rate, if you're between a 60 and 70% crit rate or higher, then it makes sense for you to go into a crit damage Circlet if you can still keep that 60 to 70% crit rate with him as a character. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit further beyond this. Let's talk about substats. The substats you should be looking for mainly with Itto. Once again, I do want to say, yes, attack is still there, but you mainly care about crit rate, crit damage, defense percent, ER, and then attack. So you want to mainly care about your crit stats, obviously, first and foremost. He is a damage dealing character, so you care about that the most. After that, defense percent is the highest there. In my personal opinion, I would rather have an ER substat after that rather than attack. And sometimes I would rather have more energy rather than having more defense, purely because I want to make sure that Itto is always in his burst state whenever he's doing damage. And it's not necessarily a 90 energy cost for his burst, it's only at 70, but you still want to keep in mind that it is still kind of difficult to do the damage you need to do if you don't have that burst. It also makes a lot of those superlative super strength stacks to go away from the first and third hits, and also it just, once again, you're not getting the huge damage increase. There's just a lot that you're losing when you don't have the burst. So unless there is a lot of an easier way, if you find with Mono-Geo teams or whatever, if your team gives you a lot of energy back and you're getting the burst back, you're fine. But if you find that you're not having a lot of energy, try to find some other way. Once again, either a 2-piece of emblem in the meantime, or try to look for some EM on your substats, or just really look for your other characters to try to funnel more energy to your character more than you already are. Looking a little bit further into Itto, let's go ahead and talk about Constellations. Now with Itto, I would say most likely with him as a character, if you have him, he's probably going to be fine at C0 just because that's really all you really need. There's no need to go beyond that. But if you are looking at constellations, let's go ahead and look at these, and then after we'll look at all the constellations, we'll see which one between the C1 and the C2 is actually probably worth it a little bit more if you are looking at constellations. Looking at the first constellation, it states that after using his burst, Itto gains 2 stacks of superlative super strength, and after 1 second, Itto will gain 1 stack of superlative super strength every 0.5 seconds for 1.5 seconds, which means that he's getting 3 stacks and he's getting 2 stacks. So within the span of once you use your burst, which if you do a normal attack gives you 1 stack, which here you're getting 1 stack after 0.5 seconds, plus these 2 stacks. So after 1 second in this, you have 1 stack, plus 2, which is 3, plus a normal attack you've probably done in that instance of time, which is 4. And half a second later, you get 5. So as soon as you get to 5, it's 1.5 seconds after you use your burst. You're at 5, which allows you to then immediately go into your charge attack state to then just do a bunch of damage. And you're also now keeping a lot of those for the next basically 1 second. You're getting 2 more stacks of superlative super strength as you're doing your damage instances. So that allows you to set up for the next time of rotation, most likely, or allows you to go a little bit further into your damage phase. So it allows you to then, once again, as soon as you're done using your burst with your C1, literally a second and a half later, you have max stacks, which is quicker than you probably were normally thinking about going into your damage instance. Then you'll restart the rotation again, probably still in your burst, and then go ahead and after you're doing their damage again, go ahead and try to get those stacks again. You'll probably be using your skill at that point to throw out Ushi to give you another stack of superlative super strength. You're already at 2 stacks. You throw out your skill, you get a third. And if he takes damage, you're at 4. And then by the time you do 2 damage hits, you're at 5. So you can see very easily how you're getting a lot more of those stacks and how easier it is with the C1, which is why I think it's an extremely strong C1 for Itto. But let's look at the C2. After using the burst, each party member whose element is Geo will decrease that skill's cooldown by 1.5 seconds and restore 6 energy to Itto. Now this is a little bit of an energy help, but it's also a cooldown help for him as a character. So let's go ahead and look at his burst cooldown. It is an 18-second cooldown with an 11-second duration. Keeping that in mind, if you are able to, with this constellation, get a maximum of 4.5 seconds off of your burst cooldown, which means you're going from the 18 seconds, you're going down to 13.5 second cooldown, which means your downtime between your duration of 11 seconds and your cooldown, when you're done basically getting that infusion and everything from this burst, after that, what that means is you only have 2.5 seconds of downtime, which is very good because that just allows you to go through your other characters, and within 2.5 seconds, you can immediately go back to Itto as soon as your other characters are done setting up. Very easy, very nice, and honestly, that C2 does carry a lot of weight as well. Looking at the C3, it increases the level of the skill, and the C5 will increase the level of the burst. The C4 states that when the Raging Oni King state from the burst ends, all nearby party members gain 20% defense and 20% attack, which could allow for more damage for characters like Zhongli, if you're going to use like a Zhongli burst, if you kind of have him on a kind of hybrid build that most people try to do, like a tank with, Staff of Home or something like that, that allows, characters like him to do more damage, characters like Albedo or Chiori to do more damage as well, increasing their defense and attack, considering I think both characters use both. That allows them to do more damage. Also, it allows other characters in the party in general to either be stronger, with defense, allowing shields to be stronger, or it allows them to have more attack and do more damage. So it's either more damage or more, strength and also more damage. So there's a lot that C4 can really bring, and it actually follows a little bit further away from the normal C4s that usually help with energy. And honestly, this C2, even though it helps with energy, helping with cooldown is extremely good for especially a C2 coming that early. Now looking at the C6, it states that Itto's charge attacks will deal 70% more crit damage. Additionally, when he uses those special, charge attacks, he has a 50% chance to not consume the stacks of superlative super strength. If you do a regular charge attack, that also has 70% crit damage. It doesn't say the special attacks that he does when he has the superlative super strength stacks. It's just saying in general, any of his charge attacks will do 70% crit damage, which is nice. You wouldn't really ever want to do it, his damage instances outside of it, but it is nice to know, I guess. Additionally, once again, it is a chance to basically be in that state longer. If you have more superlative super strength stacks, or they're not getting consumed, if every other stack is not getting consumed, that allows you to stay in that state even longer, once again allowing you to do even more damage. And now you have 70% more crit damage, which allows you probably to focus a little bit more on crit rate and whatnot, to stay a little bit higher on crit rate. The C6 is absolutely insane and really, really strong. A very, very strong C6 that we've seen, especially as an earlier character like Itto. Now, yes, this was, I think, about 3 years into the game or 2 years into the game, but still, it is still an extremely strong constellation for him. Now, obviously that makes sense considering it's a C6, so let's look at the normal constellations that people go for, which is the C1 and the C2. There's a lot to really say between these two. I think most of all, getting more of those stacks of superlative super strength is going to be way better for you. I think day in, day out, I think the Constellation 1 is better than the C2 by a very minuscule amount. The C1 is extremely strong, don't get me wrong, but I do think the C2, is extremely good as well, but the C2 is not going to really have as much hype as the C1. Now, if you already have the C1, I would highly encourage you to go for C2, but if you already have C1, don't feel like you have to get C2, like there's no reason in getting the C1. If you go for the C1, you have to go for the C2. It's not like Raiden's Constellations. It's not like Xilonen's Constellations where you get the C1, and at this point, you might as well get ready to go for the C2, either in the future or not. Once again, just keep that in mind. The C1 still does pull a lot of weight, and you don't really have a necessary need to go after the C2. It will make life easier because the rotations might be a little bit smoother if your characters are either too quick or something like that. Also, if you have some energy issues, the C2 will fix that to an extent, but I do think the C1 holds a little bit more water most of the time if your Itto is extremely well built. Now, once again, obviously getting to the C2 is just going to be extremely strong for you, so if you can and you want to and you really like Itto, go ahead and go for the C2. You might as well at this point, just because you really like Itto, makes sense, go for it. Now looking at teams for Itto, honestly, like I was talking about before, the Mono-Geo team is going to work the best, so all 4 members being Geo is going to be great. Also, we have a little bit more characters than just, Noelle, Zhongli, Albedo and Gorou and Itto and, Ningguang a little bit, there's a little bit more of a usability of other Geo characters, specifically characters like Chiori, that are going to be a little bit more helpful for us to be a little bit more different on using a really strong Itto team. From what I've seen, probably one of the better teams that we've seen is going to be Itto, Zhongli, Gorou, and Chiori. Reason why: Chiori does a lot of really solid damage from off field. Also, Zhongli and Itto are throwing out Geo constructs to let her do more damage by putting 2 of her Tomatos basically out on field. Itto is getting the maximum buff from Gorou's skill by having 4 Geo members out on field. If there's one other Geo character besides Gorou, there's a defense bonus, which obviously, Itto likes, but the other characters do as well. 2 other Geo characters increases resistance to interruption, which Itto already gets himself, but more resistance to interruption isn't terrible. And then also a Geo damage bonus, which all 3 characters are going to like. Most likely, Zhongli's built on some sort of hybrid build. Chiori is a damage dealing character, and Itto is obviously your main damage dealer. So with that being said, that's kind of extremely good for Gorou. Gorou is basically immediately tied to Itto's hip most of the time. Zhongli is probably your next best pick in terms of Itto's kind of characters to use, and that's just because of, once again, the shielding that he can give. Even though you have, that increased resistance to interruption, if you're using Serpent Spine and you don't have his weapon, Zhongli is one of the best characters, if not the best character for shielding in the game, therefore allowing Itto to take no damage most of the time as long as, Zhongli's shield is up. Itto's not taking damage, which means you can keep those stacks of the weapon from Serpent Spine higher, which means you can do more damage with Itto. Also, Itto's already a little bit, like we talked about before, he's a little bit more vulnerable in that state when he's doing the damage in his burst, so keep that in mind as you're kind of running around with Zhongli and Itto. Is an extremely goated combo, combined with that with Gorou, and you've already got a really strong team. Albedo can work and did work in the past with the Mono-Geo team. From what most people are saying, though, throwing in Chiori is probably going to do you better. Also, with having, one of her constructs out on the side, and then with Itto throwing out his Ushi or Zhongli throwing out his pillar, allowing 2 Geo constructs allows, Chiori to have double the amount of, dolls, which means double the amount of damage from off-field happening for Itto. Keep that in mind as you're kind of running around with characters. Now, if you don't have Zhongli and you're like, I really want a solid shielder, and you still want to keep the Mono-Geo idea, Noelle does extremely well at being a strong shielder. Just make sure you're kind of going for like a tank version of her where she's just going full blown into what she needs for, shielding. And just keep that in mind as you're kind of running with that, and you'll be fine. If you're, already kind of blew past the idea of a Mono-Geo team and you're already using someone like Furina or something like that, and you've given up on, building your Gorou, and you have like Itto and, Layla or something like that to kind of be your shielder, go ahead and throw Furina in the team. If you've already given up on the Mono-Geo idea, throw Furina in the team if you have her. She's going to be extremely strong for the team. And at that point, you might as well either throw in a character like Xilonen if you have her, because she's going to be extremely useful. Also, Xilonen could also be used in the Mono-Geo team. Xilonen will give Geo resistance to the entire party if that is kind of the whole idea. But she can't be your healer because none of those source samples that she has are going to be changed, which means that she can't start healing in her burst. She'll do more damage, but there won't be a healer on your team if you use her and you don't have another healer in the team. I would say probably the best team as of right now, in my personal opinion, is going to be Itto, Xilonen, Zhongli, and Gorou. I do think Chiori is extremely good and extremely strong, but if we're talking specifically Itto damage, that's probably what's going to be best. If you're thinking, I really want Chiori to be in the team and I have Chiori and I want to make her useful, probably even better team than that, which I don't really know, but a probably even better team than that is getting rid of Gorou and throwing in Xilonen instead and keeping Chiori in the team with Zhongli and Itto. Zhongli, once again, shield, borderline necessary for a character like Itto, especially if you're using, if you're worried about things like Serpent Spine and whatnot, the ability. Even without that, I would still say that Zhongli is extremely good for this team. Chiori, extremely strong off-field support for Geo damage. Xilonen is decreasing the resistance of Geo for the entire party to do more damage. And obviously you have your damage dealer. There's a few different ways to really go about making the Mono-Geo team, but those are some of the ways. Like I was talking about before, if you do have a character, once again, Furina, if you have Layla, once again, you're outside of the kind of normal Mono-Geo team. Layla, Furina, Xilonen is probably going to be a pretty strong comp already, and then, throw in Itto at the end, obviously, as a damage dealer. If you're kind of looking forward to that. The issue with that team, though, as you could already see, most of the characters are 5 stars that I mentioned to really use for the Mono-Geo team. I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 characters that are 5-star Geo characters to kind of throw together for the Mono-Geo team. And arguably, who's better between, the Xilonen and Gorou combo or Xilonen and Chiori combo, whatever that may be, that's still an amazing amount of, 5-star characters to really have, which means it's extremely expensive to really build Itto. So if you are, looking to build your Itto, I would just say kind of buckle down and get ready if you haven't already done so. But that does mean that a lot of what you are going to face is not going to be able to, really get rid of you. There's very few things in the game that are just like completely Geo resistant. So that is kind of in your favor for most of those teams though, and which is why Itto can still be extremely strong in what he does. And the more characters that come out that can kind of buff him, Also, Chiori being another pretty strong character is going to help him out as a character as well. Well, that's everything I've got talking about Itto. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you guys had any other thoughts and ideas about Itto, let me know down in the comments. Also, with him as a character, he's kind of an interesting character already, so I'm already looking forward to his next banner. I do want to see how characters like Xilonen and Chiori, and obviously with, their already combo, are gonna really do well with Itto. So let me know if you guys do already use Itto with Xilonen and you got Xilonen because you have Itto. Let me know how that kind of works. I'm kind of interested to see how Xilonen works on a kind of Mono-Geo team. Well, with all that out of the way, thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.